All right, welcome back to the Futurists. I am your host, Brett King, and joining me on this rare occasion for us all together are our other two co-hosts, Brian Solis. It's been a while since you've been on, Brian. Welcome back.
Thank you.
And
I miss you guys.
Rob Tercek, of course. How are you, Rob?
I'm great, thanks. Hi, Brian. Great to see you, man.
Great to see you, Rob.
You've been a busy guy. Everybody's been traveling. I was in Asia.
Yeah.
You guys are in Asia. Man, everybody's flying around the world. Well, hey, man, what a year this has been. As I was thinking about the year ahead, usually this time of year, December, is when you start to see all these newsletters and pundits speculating about what's going to come next, and people post their forecasts. But if you notice, this year there weren't so many. And I think the reason for that is it's very unpredictable. We're in that phase where it's really hard to place a bet on what's going to happen next year. And that caused me to think back to this past year has been just so full of surprises and tumult and changes. Makes a very unpredictable landscape ahead.
Well, we should start with that. What were the highlights for you guys for this year? Maybe Brian. The obvious highlight is you launched your book, your latest book, which is phenomenal. But what else has been? Yeah, exactly. Mind shift. Yeah. What else has been on the highlight reel?
A big thing on the highlight reel has been just the fulfillment of work. So for those who don't know, I have a day job as the head of global innovation at ServiceNow. And this has been an incredibly transformative year where organizations are recognizing that the decade of digital transformation just isn't working out as they thought it might. And the rise of artificial intelligence is really starting to open the door to bigger questions around business transformation. What do we need to think about that we're not thinking about? And the conversations that I've been having this year, and it's going to lend into where I hope next year goes, is for real, honest to goodness, transformation of business as usual.
So that there's no more business as usual? Is that what you mean? Or?
Yeah. So what does that mean, Brian? Because we've been hearing about digital transformation for 15 years, right? So it seems like it's a done deal at this point.
Yeah, well, the stats are wild. They're something like 75% of companies didn't realize the returns that they had felt they were going to get from digital transformation. And if you really look at the efforts historically, there was very little transformation and a whole bunch of digitization. And as they move into an era of artificial intelligence, they were taking that digitization and automating it. Or this is where the strategy lies currently. But where the conversations get really interesting is that the right digitization to help us get to 2030 and 2035, assuming that things are going to wildly continue to evolve? And so these are the inception of conversations that I'm having now. And I'm an optimist. So to me, it says that now we have an ability to influence where we go from here.
I have this conversation quite frequently at the moment with the banking sector, in that I say that if you think about what we need for autonomous supply chain and highly automated systems in respect to what we expect of the banking system, then none of that is going to run on old technology. It's going to run on net new technology, smart contracts and tokenization, digital twins, all the stuff that Rob and I love talking about. But that means essentially that to have the technical agility to be a next generation AI capable bank, you need completely new infrastructure. AI is not going to run on 1960 mainframe COBOL code, right? It's not going to run on siloed data pools. So this is the thing is the companies that have been emerging since the .com and the companies that have emerged most recently in respect to like super app platforms and next gen banking, the wallet ecosystem, Stripe, Nubank, etc. These are actually the guys that have the technology infrastructure that will enable them to operate AI systems, not necessarily Bank of America, Wells Fargo, HSBC, right?
Right, because they don't have anything to defend. New companies can start from scratch, and old companies have legacy processes. And they also have legacy workers, candidly, who don't want to adapt. I'm sure, Brian, you're running into that. There was a recent survey published. They interviewed 26,000 companies that have purchased artificial intelligence for workers, things like Microsoft's Copilot. And the results are incredibly disappointing. 90% of the workers don't know how to use it, which is no surprise if you've tried to use an LLM, like a ChatGPT or Anthropic Cloud yourself. If you don't learn how to write good prompts, if you don't make the effort or have no curiosity about how to do that better, you're going to get mediocre results. If you make a little bit of an effort, if you do a little bit of research or read about it or watch a YouTube video, you can learn how to prompt these things and get far better results very easily. Like, it's not much effort. However, if a company is going to introduce this technology and doesn't train workers, then it's going to be disappointing. The result's going to fall flat. The other part of that equation is a lot of workers, frankly, have no motivation to learn. Brett, we had Melanie Hilton on the show. She's an expert in supply chain. A couple months ago, I spoke to her about digitizing supply chain. It's been a discussion topic for 25 years. It's been very, very slow. There are still guys with hard hats walking around with clipboards at the dock, checking things in on paper, right? So that hasn't updated as rapidly as everyone had hoped.
We talked about the strike too, right?
That's what I was leading to. Yeah, you jumped the gun. Exactly where I'm heading is, the Longshoremen's Union in the United States is dead set against automation. During the pandemic, many Asian seaports upgraded. Their container ports now have at least semi-automated. In some cases, they're fully automated, but only a few. There are about 1,500 seaports in the world. Only a dozen or so have gone full automation. About 60 have some kind of automation, but still there's 1,300 that have none. In the United States, we have some big seaports, and they are among the least efficient seaports in the world.
Yeah, so they've just done an agreement for 20 years to not automate, right? That's right. What the deal was, right? It's crazy.
President Trump just tweeted yesterday that he met with the head of the Longshoremen's Union, and he's dead set against automation. And this is quite an interesting signal coming from a guy who's just been elected. Everybody thinks this is going to be the era of automation and artificial intelligence. He was going to let all the tech companies run. Apparently not. He came out strongly against it yesterday, saying he supports the workers, he supports the union, which is kind of a reversal from what he ran on. But nevertheless, that's where he's at. It sends a signal.
What a surprise.
Yeah, he's going to be opposed to automation. Well, it is true. I mean, this is what makes it hard to predict, right? Here's a guy who says one thing one day and the next day does something completely different. So it's very hard to rely on his words. But at any rate, you can see that there is a lot of entrenched interest in fighting the future. And Brian, I'm sure that's what you're encountering. Companies can make all the investments they want, but if the workers won't go for it, and if you don't incentivize them or train them, they're not going to take it.
Yeah, absolutely, Robin. And to a comparison you made earlier, if we take the role of leadership throughout this, right? Workers can't go where they don't know to go.
Yeah.
And this is an era where we don't have conversations enough about how leadership needs to transform. And not to plug the book, but that's what Mindshift is about, is that anybody can be a leader now. We need people to be leaders now.
Not to plug the book, but I'm going to.
But let me plug the book.
And just in case you're listening, the book is called Mindshift. It's by Brian Solis, the author of a number of excellent books. We strongly recommend.
Here it is. But I got it with me on the road in Dubai, of course.
Thank you, Brad, and thank you, Rob. The Copilot example. It's not delivering the returns because people are using it probably the way they use Google, with expected outcomes and results, to build a better sentence, to build a better presentation. But if leadership were to step in and say, look, that's one side of it. We can help you do what you did yesterday better today. But what if I could paint a picture for you that outlined how a human and machine collaboration, just in today's Copilot or today's generative AI, could help you accomplish something you didn't know you could do or didn't think was possible. And once we could have leadership down conversations like that to open people's minds, to incentivize them to move in this new direction, I hope that becomes intoxicating. I hope that becomes exciting. I hope it unlocks childlike wonder in all of us to be able to see what we couldn't do before, to put on an AI cape and help define new eras of applications, new eras of possibilities, bring up people from all over the place to define what a different future could look like.
So let me read a quote from Brian's book actually on this. The distinction here is that mobile devices such as iPhone and Androids and popular apps are conditioning customers to act and think differently. This evolution is outpacing the customer experience most companies provide their customers. But it occurs to me that if you are using AI like ChatGPT, your view of the world takes that extra step of what's possible. And again, I've said that there's two types of people in the world today: those who are using AI to enhance their career or enhance their business, and those are going to be made redundant or replaced by the first category, right? And I think that it's your ability to imagine the world as a different place that puts you in a position to capitalize on automation and technology, really.
Yeah.
Let me throw one other idea in here, and this is a little bit orthogonal, but I think it's related. You both can relate to it. But Brett, you often speak about finance and the banking business. No doubt, they've been heavy users of AI for 30 years, right? When we scan a check, that's analytic AI. That's recognizing that signature. We've been doing that for a dozen years on our phones, and so it's not new for those industries to use artificial intelligence. But the way they've used it is more or less to automate existing functions. And I think the problem that most companies have, and the leadership problem that Brian's talking about, is to really apply artificial intelligence to an existing business, you have to rethink the entire process from the beginning all the way through and move AI to the center. Now, Brett, my perspective is from the entertainment industry. As you both know, I'm working on a startup company right now that puts AI in the motion picture business. We're generating films using AI. And our vision here is that it should be central to the process. We think it's a general purpose technology. In other words, it's not just something that's going to automate one piece or one part of the puzzle or one step in the supply chain. We think you have to integrate AI from the very beginning, from the original idea all the way through to the way you serve an ad to a viewer when they're watching a show on television. And that's happening very slowly because there's points of resistance in every single step in the process. So here in the U.S., I don't think we're going to see fully automated animation or films for probably several years because there's so many players in the supply chain or in the production process who are against it, who are opposed to it. And the leadership doesn't understand what it means to fully automate. So you also have nobody driving a vision. Like there isn't a clear vision of what that looks like. My thinking is you have to rethink it from scratch. The analogy I've been using is Henry Ford's automation system in factories. We had steam-powered factories in the 19th century, but with the advent of the electric engine, you could rethink the layout of a factory. And factories used to be tall and vertical and narrow, like those buildings in downtown New York and Soho. Under Henry Ford, they started to become horizontal buildings because you could put the electric motors and all the machines in different places, put them near where the workers were, and automate the way the parts move through the factory. That was a complete rethink of what a factory was, all the way to like rethinking the architecture of the building. And I think that's a great metaphor. Yeah, that's a great metaphor for how you have to approach AI. You have to rethink the entire business process from the very beginning, every step of the way through. How do I put AI at the center of each job function at each stage of the process? Now, that requires leadership that understands all those business processes.
Yes.
And I noticed
and also understands instinctively AI, right?
Yeah, you have a lot of people in business who, a lot of leadership in companies. When companies recruit a new CEO or a new head of operations, they pull them out of some other field, some other industry. So they don't really know that particular business process extremely well. They're not, they didn't grow up in the company. They didn't work on the factory floor, for instance. And so for them, it's all kind of theoretical. And they're looking for somebody else to come in and figure out where to add the automation. And Brian, that might be a consulting opportunity for a company like yours, but it's not leadership. It's not the kind of leadership that you're talking about. It's not the kind of transformational leadership. So we need leaders who understand every stage of the business process. We always talk about Elon Musk, and I kind of hate referring to him as an example, but here's a guy who is willing to blow up a business process and start from scratch. And he did it with robotics at Tesla. And his vision is that the robots will be moving so fast you won't even be able to watch them with your eye.
You'll need a strobe light, yeah.
Yeah, it'll just gradually build a car in front of you, maybe someday. But his point is he's got a vision. He's driving the vision. He understands each step in the process, and he's not afraid to blow the system up and start over again. Most other companies are reluctant to do that, and then they've got labor problems and leadership problems that prevent them from doing it.
I just want to pay you a massive compliment, Rob. I found myself here over the last few minutes switching from co-host to audience.
Gosh.
The way that you
what is this? This is log rolling. Gosh.
The way that you just explained that is probably the cleanest I've ever heard it. And that, you just inspired me to take a bunch of notes because that's the conversation I'm having every single day. And the Henry Ford building metaphor, I'll borrow it and credit you, but that is exactly right. And so if you go back to the Donald Rumsfeld quote that you don't know what you don't know, this is why leadership is not moving in this direction, because they don't know to. And just psychologically, when we don't know what to do, we lean on what we do know. And so that takes the linear, iterative methodology of using AI then to automate existing processes without questioning what we need to do, because then it challenges our own assumptions of what we know, our own beliefs, our own conventions. And this is that moment for a fundamental shift in leadership where someone like you, someone like Brett, someone like me comes in to paint a vision of a probable future in steps that people can consume and understand then the role that they play in moving in this direction, and then starting to surround themselves with the people who will help them move in this direction and rethink the existing board of advisors, the existing circle of yes that's around most people, and now be able to empower from a leadership perspective, and then to everyone else that same transformation that they made for their workforce, for their skill sets, for their incentivization models, for their reward systems, because otherwise this isn't going to happen. And if it does, it's going to be very slow. And what we're going to give rise to is essentially the equivalent of the Amazon in 1994, the Netflix in '99, and every evolution that they've made since then, and Uber in 2007, and it's therefore they're on, right? We'll have our AI first companies that'll just come in and move at the speed of robots.
It has to happen, right? Because the way we're portraying it right now, you can see how difficult it is for an existing large scale manufacturer to make this transformation. I frankly doubt the leadership's going to come from within. I don't think the leadership has a deep enough understanding of their current process or AI's capabilities. Typically, what's a corporation going to do? They're going to hire McKinsey. They're going to hire PwC. They're going to hire Accenture to come in, do a survey, do a study, interview the leading executives, compile a report, and drop this big report on the CEO's desk. And what is the purpose of that report? Why do they spend those millions of dollars? It's to give the CEO plausible deniability so he doesn't get fired by his board of directors for taking no action. I mean, honestly, this is not the solution. If anything, if those companies are successful, they're going to sell a huge, complicated piece of custom software to that company, but they're not really going to affect the kind of transformation that you're talking about, Brian. It's not going to happen that way.
But this is where things are starting to reshape on the global map of supply chain. You know, like GM just announced a $5 billion write-off in China, right? Because their approach is basically failing. At the same time, you've got Chinese auto manufacturers. You know, for example, Xpeng and Geely. And BYD. These guys have factories that are 85% automated. The production of their vehicles are 85% automated. China is now the largest exporter of electric vehicles, you know, vehicles on the planet, you know, full stop. But that's the sort of transformation you need. And you know, I asked the question whether traditional organizations, whether they're banks or traditional auto manufacturers or or airlines, are they going to be capable of making those transitions? You know, and is 2025 going to be the year where, you know, we start to see that separation?
I'd say almost certainly not if you're looking at legacy companies. And I think what you just pointed out illustrates the point that it has to be a new company that starts from scratch that says, okay, we have no legacy process. We have no legacy workers who are going to stop us. We're going to build the company from the ground up. And by the way,
and healthcare, right? We'd have to do that with healthcare as well, right? Which is how do you do that?
Started on healthcare. Don't even get me. Do you want to go there? Because we can. I mean,
well, we can, but we need to have a quick break, don't we? So let's.
That was abrupt. Yeah, sure. Okay.
All right, my bad. No, but I didn't want to get into it. And then, like,
it's all good. Do the break.
All right, let's go to break. You're listening to The Futurists. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors.
Welcome back to The Futurists, where we are exploring 2025 and all of its predictable uncertainty that it brings. Now, Rob, Brett, I'm going to just say one word, see where it takes us. Healthcare.
Oh my gosh. Well, so look, first off, let's point to the elephant in the room. the assassination of the CEO
Oh
of United
yeah,
Healthcare
yeah.
was a really gruesome episode, and there's a lot of sort of a macabre reaction in social media where people were celebrating it, right? So let's note that, and I certainly think it's not cool to kill people. Like this is definitely not something we want to celebrate. But what a lot of people have pointed out is that there is a tremendous pent up feeling from people that they're not being served by the current healthcare system, that there are real problems. And I think that's undeniably true. United Healthcare famously, it's come out now, that denies 32% of the claims that are submitted. So people are paying for healthcare. It's expensive in the United States. We know that. And they're not really getting the service they need. And when they find out that they're not getting coverage is usually when they need it the most, when they have like an urgent care problem. In some cases, we've heard horror stories where people are on the operating table and United Healthcare says, we're not going to authorize that procedure. But the other issue is that the healthcare system in the United States is completely obscure. You don't know the price of any procedure. If you go to a hospital and ask them for something, you have no idea what it's going to cost because the fact is there's a dozen different prices depending on what kind of healthcare you have and what kind of deal they've cut. So people are starting to look now at the Obamacare Act, which was an attempt to reform healthcare. And they're seeing that one of the results of it is these gigantic corporations have emerged. These sort of conglomerates have emerged that are buying every step in the healthcare system, every different business in the healthcare system. They're starting to merge them together, and we're creating these behemoths. They aren't very efficient. They're not very profitable either. They have a bloated overhead, bloated administrative cost. And so what we've created are these colossal private bureaucracies that tax American workers. And they don't really deliver very good service, as we all know. The healthcare outcomes haven't improved significantly. So there is a lot of focus on this.
I want to talk about this for a moment. I saw a great quote the other day about that private healthcare doesn't really add any value in the system. It just adds middlemen into the process. And this has been argued for a long time in the U.S. political landscape. But the reality is this. I did this research extensively for the rise of technosocialism. The percentage of cost of the US national healthcare system that's administrative costs is around 40%, 40. The NHS, which is in the UK, which is considered a fairly inefficient public healthcare system, the total administrative cost is 4%.
Yeah.
Right?
And it covers everybody. So there's also nobody in the UK who doesn't get care.
Yeah.
Certainly you can criticize the UK system, but the fact is it does deliver healthcare to everybody. If you want private healthcare in the UK, you can buy it if you need like a supplemental policy.
But if you want to generate large scale health improvement and you want to do that at scale, we're going to have to throw artificial intelligence into the mix. It's going to have to be data focused. Diagnostics are incredibly important, particularly when we have things like oncology, cancer diagnosis. Early detection and proper diagnosis are really critical, and we get that often wrong in the healthcare system. But this would require us dismantling the private healthcare system in the US. So I'm not sure that we're going to see next generation healthcare emerging in the United States. Brian, what do you think?
No, I think you're right about that. Yeah, go, Brian.
I mean, unfortunately, I don't want to open the door to politics, but what we are seeing is just sort of the byproduct of essentially lobbying, money moving behind the scenes, profitability, greed, and Brett, you put out a point. If you want to have better healthcare, that is not where most of these organizations are starting from. They are starting from what's in their best interests. And I would love to see, Rob, to the point where we were talking about earlier, the rise of AI first companies in this new era. I mean, if you want to create a new type of healthcare company that, Brett, like to your point, that's AI first, that's taking out a lot of the middlemen and introducing an optimized process for all of this, that wouldn't be unheard of. That is American innovation at its heart. But does it get killed before it? And that's probably the wrong word to use. But does it see the light of day because of everything else? But I would like to see that. I would like to see that spirit of innovation that we have become known for way back in the day, and that we're losing to other markets and countries as a result of where we are politically.
So if you zoom out one notch, one of the problems here is that the industry is highly consolidated, and there's a lot of economic incentive for the big companies to get even bigger. And if that doesn't change, then we're never going to have innovation, because big companies do not innovate. Big dominant companies in a category, when you have an oligopoly of 4 providers in any category, they have an incentive not to compete. They want to keep things stable. That's true for a number of different industries. And as I pointed out on the show several times, 75% of American industry is consolidated down to 4 major providers. That's everything from food to transportation to airports to banks and so forth. That's one of the reasons why these industries are sclerotic and the technology innovation is quite slow. They just don't have an incentive to do it. So if you want to change healthcare or any other sector, you got to break up the conglomerates. Now, on this front, it's actually quite interesting, because one would assume President Trump would favor big corporations, right? He's sort of a big business kind of guy. But what's quite interesting now is he's taken a shot at one of the most profitable sectors at these healthcare companies. That's the pharmaceutical management companies, the pharmaceutical management organizations. All the big healthcare companies bought pharma management as a piece of their conglomerate as they grew. And now he's saying that should be unbundled, that should be broken out. And actually, that's a step in the right direction. I think he's quite right about that. And I sure hope he goes and does that. If we start to break apart these giant conglomerates, you're going to see opportunity for innovation. You'll see the opportunity for small companies to start up. And those small companies are the ones that are going to apply technology to get an advantage, right? Big companies are unlikely to do it for the reasons we said.
Rob, I'm going to hope it's okay, because I really like what you said there. And if we could turn that into a trend,
Yeah,
that becomes the beginning of a new genre, a new era, hopefully a wave of new innovation within the United States. Instead, though, right, I hope we don't err in the other direction, where we're breaking up companies that are not impacting health, not impacting our economic factors. For example, breaking up Google being the priority of the efforts versus
I'm all
healthcare.
for it. I'm all for it, Brian. I'm all for it. I think it's going to happen. You have 3 antitrust cases in the courts. They're kind of wending their way through the courts right now. Judge Amit Mehta has to make a decision about whether or not to break up Google's monopoly on their dominance of the browser business. The recommendation from the Department of Justice is that Google should sell off. They should be forced to sell off the Chrome browser. They should be forced to stop paying companies like Apple to make Google the default search. And there's even a proposal for Google to have to sell off the Android operating system for mobile phones. Now, of those, I think it's actually quite likely, I would say it's 50-50 likely, that Google will be forced to sell off Chrome. This is fascinating. I think it's almost a certainty that Google will no longer be able to bribe Apple to stay out of search. Now, if you think about search right now, Brian, if you go to Google, if you type in a search query on Google, you're going to get mediocre results. You're going to get results that are loaded with ads. You're going to get results that are loaded with keyword optimization. You're going to get all this SEO junk. In other words, you're not really getting a great experience
I'm
today on
using
Google.
ChatGPT now instead of
Well,
search.
smart people are doing that. Smart people are switching to Claude or to Perplexity.
Perplexity, yeah.
But most people have the habit of going to Google. So search needs innovation. It's the largest category of computing by far. And frankly, there isn't any innovation happening. The innovation Brett just described is happening in an adjacent category, right? And that might disrupt
TikTok,
search.
Instagram.
Great. I think disruption, I think it's overdue. We have 5 gigantic companies that dominate the NASDAQ. They account for almost all the growth in the stock market in the last couple of years. It's time to break them up. Let's see what happens. It would be great for startups. One thing you hear consistently from venture capitalists is that they're frustrated because those dominant tech companies stifle innovation and squish small, innovative startup companies, or they just acquire the teams and disband the project. So my view is, frankly, breaking up Google would not necessarily be a bad thing. Here's one example. Google pays Apple $20 billion a year to be the default search engine. So when you use your iPhone, you do a search, typically you're going to get a Google result. Now, they basically are paying Apple to stay out of the search business. They don't want Apple to compete. If those payments stop, first of all, that $20 billion represents about 20% of Apple's profits, right? So first off, Apple's going to have to make up that lost revenue. I guarantee you within a year, Apple will be in the search business. They're going to compete with Google, right? So basically, Google has been bribing Apple to stay out of their business. When Apple enters search, are they going to enter it in that traditional way where you go to a website, you type in a line of text? Of course not. They're going to do it with Siri. They're going to do it with artificial intelligence. They already have a partnership with OpenAI. And so you'll see some novel approach to search integrated in that Apple ecosystem. I can only think this is going to be a good thing for innovation. I can't wait to see somebody attack search and change it and so on. That's the essence of competition. It serves everybody except for the incumbent conglomerates.
Yeah. Well, let's get into a bit more of the 2025 conversation. We are doing that, obviously, but let's talk about what do you guys think is going to happen after the inauguration of Trump on January 20th in terms of some of the macro things that we see happening? The Israeli conflict in Palestine, the Ukraine-Russia conflict. What do you guys think is going to be the washout there? Brian, you want to kick us off?
I uh, I would just be honest. As a role of a futurist, I have not been exploring those. I've been looking at those from a role of just being a human being and
A humanist, yeah.
and just hoping for the best outcomes for people in general. I will say though that I am strangely optimistic that this Trump administration is going to help us accelerate resolutions on both of those fronts. And I'm hoping that we see instead a focus on, Rob, what you were talking about, prioritizing the American first priorities around improving healthcare, improving the opportunities for American consumers to bring down prices for affordability, maybe to bring down inflation to the point where the Americans are investing again. So I'm hoping this shift will resolve those conflicts. But again, I haven't been studying it to the extent that both of you have.
I was struck, Brett. I will tell you, just 6 months ago, I was very pessimistic about the Middle East. And candidly, I thought Israel was in a situation that was like a no-win situation. It really seemed quite grim, and I got it wrong. I'm going to admit I had the wrong read on the situation. Here we have, Netanyahu was thrust into a situation certainly he didn't choose, caught off guard, no doubt about it, responded initially with just phenomenal belligerence, devastating loss, terrible humanitarian crisis. All of those things are true, but then shifted towards the real source of the problems in the Middle East, which is Iran, and systematically began to demolish and dismantle Iran's lines of support, starting with Hezbollah. And actually, we have to say, they've been successful. I mean, Hezbollah has been crippled in Lebanon. And now, amazingly, I never would have guessed this would have occurred a year ago. The situation in Syria is such that the reigning dictator has been kicked out of there, right? And they were backed by the Russians for decades, right? So that family has been backed by the Russians and by by Iran for decades. And that was the vector of support. That's how Iran was able to resupply Hezbollah and put pressure on Israel. Israel systematically demolished or dismantled all those supply lines now, and Iran has been revealed to be very, very weak, which is, I think, a big surprise. People were treading very lightly because there's fear that they're going to have a nuclear weapon or something. But I think what we've all seen in the last year is that Iran really doesn't have that many responses to Israel. Israel's a relatively small country, and they're fighting back. The other thing that's been revealed there is Russia's really weak, because Russia has been supporting the Assad regime, since his father, Hafez Assad, for 30, 40 years. They were unable to keep them in power, and just in a matter of months, that regime has been kicked out, and the Russians are so understressed right now, or they're so overstressed, I should say, in the Ukraine, and their supplies are so absorbed in that Ukraine conflict, they're running on empty, and they're unable to resupply Syria. And of course, Syria was the linchpin to Russia's plans to expand into Congo and into North Africa. So that rolls back Russia considerably out of the Middle East. So it's a real big setback for Iran. It's a really big setback for Russia in the Middle East. And it's a powerful reaffirmation of Israel's position in the Middle East. I think all that's quite surprising, because the conventional wisdom was going the other way a year ago.
Sorry to step on you there.
No problem.
Having said that, I think, the war crimes indictment of Netanyahu did give him pause. And I think that's part of the reason we seem to be closer to a resolution, as well as, as you say, Hezbollah's, situation. But
I think at some point he just said, we're in it to win it. Like, he knew he was going to be vilified, and
exactly.
People are horrified. And
he just wanted to be done. Yeah.
Yeah. So at this point, he's like, I got nothing to lose. I'm already considered a villain. I'm going to just go for it and clean up the job. But he has literally dismantled Iran's position in the surrounding nations. It's quite amazing.
But again, I will say that that's a bit of a US centric view.
Of course, no, of course. And there's plenty of people who would argue against me and point out that there has been
No, but
tremendous
I want to give you a
humanitarian
slightly different perception. Brian is heading to Riyadh on Monday. I'm in Dubai right now. And I will say what most Americans would not be able to conceptualize or understand is that the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia are amongst two of the most dynamic, interesting economies on the planet right now, right?
Yeah.
They are upbeat. There's lots of technology being deployed. There's a lot of direct foreign investment coming in. There's immigration coming in. There's incredible energy and economic activity happening here. And frankly, I'm planning on spending, most of my time or a lot of my time next year in the region because of that. Because as a futurist, this is UAE and the kingdom are two of the most future-ready economies on the planet, well ahead, philosophically of the United States in terms of adaptation to climate and automation and things like that.
And a commitment to AI. I'm with you, Brett. But what those countries really crave is stability, and stability means an end of conflict, right?
Yes.
None of those countries are supporters of Hamas. None of those countries are supporters of Hezbollah. They're all opposed to Iran. They all know Iran has been a mischief maker. Iran is not a force of good. They've been just kind of the spoiler in the region. So they all benefit from this response. Go ahead, Brian. I didn't mean to step on you. Go for it.
No, but that was, I'm all about building. And to bring it back to your point too, Rob, Brett, you know better than anybody. These are groups that are focused on leadership where each one of them has a 2030 vision for where the country is moving toward. And it is a mandate for every industry to, again, work towards that vision and describe their own vision of how they're going to get there. We don't have that here in the United States.
Yeah. And there's not that excitement. People are negative about the future in the West, in Europe and the US, as if it's a thing to be pensive about, because of the disruptive potential of it. And, the dock workers strike we talked about earlier is an example of that. But at the same time, we're celebrating Elon and Vivek coming in to do Doge to make the government more efficient.
Not me.
No, well, I'm not necessarily celebrating. I think it's going to be chaotic. But having said that, the Dubai government and the Saudi government have had these things in place for a few years now, and they've made incredible advances. I recently just applied for my gold visa in Dubai, in UAE. I got it in 2 hours, right? Now, this is, I spent 4 months offshore last year trying to get my US visa renewed. And I got it done in UAE in 2 hours and a new identity card and everything, right? And they don't even stick a visa in your passport anymore. It's all electronic. You come to the airport and you walk through a tunnel. There's not even a gate. There's not even an immigration desk. You just walk through a tunnel.
Your face is your ID.
I mean, this is like Minority Report type stuff that we're seeing, and it's not being developed in the US because of the bureaucracy attached to that. So I think 2025 is the year where we start to see, if you're reinforcing bureaucracy of the 19th and 20th century, you're going to start to see the gap opening up very radically. Countries and companies who are ready to take the next step are ready to say, let's reset. Let's try a completely different approach here, rather than, well, we've got all of these vested interests we need to take care of, right?
The one conclusion people come to is that you need a strong man, you need an authoritarian leader, a dictator to get things done because democracy is inefficient and messy and slow and so forth. And I think this is a fallacy. I think this is untrue. I don't think that actually works in the long run. In the short run, yeah, sure, a dictator can blast some holes in the system and change things, but it doesn't always work out in the long run. In the United States, I think that's part of the...
what are we calling a dictator, right? Is Singapore a dictatorship? Is Dubai a dictatorship? Well, but this is where we have to really rethink this, because a dictator that builds, or a royal family or a leadership infrastructure that builds a beneficial structure for their
You can have a
people.
benevolent dictator, but if you don't have a democracy where people have the right to vote, if you don't have the
But
franchise, guess what? That's
I'm
not a
not saying I'm
representative
not
government.
saying I'm pro dictatorship. I'm saying that democracy in trying to get consensus amongst a left and right platform in the United States today is almost impossible. So that in itself is dramatically slowing down innovation.
It slows it down. There's no question. And as you know, Winston Churchill said, we quoted him before, it's the worst form of government except for all the others. And I have to believe that that's the case. So we thrash through, we discuss, we debate, we go back and forth, we vacillate in the United States. We don't make clean, decisive decisions. We don't have that level of directive. Even as much as people voted for Trump, those who cast a vote in favor of a strong man, they're not going to get that kind of leadership. He's already backing away from many of the promises he made in the campaign. Just to forecast, you had asked a minute ago what's going to happen next year. We already know what's going to happen. He was talking about 60% tariffs against Chinese imports. Now he's backed it down to 10%. Watch, he'll give away that 10% just to cut a deal with China. Gosh, Brian, this has been a lively and sort of contentious conversation. Do you have views that you want to share before we wrap up?
No, but I will say this, that it's just an error of my work. And I'm sure, Rob, you'll have a take on this. And I actually do want to hear more about what you're working on, because it sounds fascinating. It sounds like a productive solution to the doom and gloom that AI is going to close Hollywood. And
Oh no,
I,
it's going to be great.
yeah,
No,
I see it
I
as
know
a
the doom and gloom
renaissance.
scenario is the one that always mystifies me. It's like I look at this stuff, I'm like, wow, we have so much possibility ahead,
So
so
much
many new
possibility,
opportunities.
and it's true for every industry, every opportunity. And I'll say the area where I'm focusing on 2025, and I am going to give my friend Peter Sims a shout out here. I got an early morning text from him. Peter had actually woke me up, and it said, uh, "We missed you at dinner last night. We had 14 of the greatest tech leaders in Silicon Valley all debating what is an AI agent and what is an agentic enterprise."
What's the answer? What was the conclusion?
They didn't actually come to a conclusion. Uh, Only though that he sent that text to me because I've been sharing with him my 2025 is all about answering this question. And the conversation that we had, into your Henry Ford metaphor, is that I believe 2025 is going to be the year not of the transformation, but of the conversations about what do we do with the right
Hmm.
leaders, so that those organizations, those legacy organizations, are starting to make at least some type of effort, some type of strides towards understanding the potentiality of the shift from AI automation, AI agents to an agentic enterprise, of reimagining processes, reimagining operations, reimagining work, and most importantly, reimagining outcomes. Because with all of that comes that 2030 vision that we were talking about, that we can then work towards as a leadership, as an organization, as a workforce. So that's where my work is going for 2025.
Cool. On that topic of agents, it's a lively discussion, right? And I think you're right. It's an undefined term. What is agentic AI? My definition is very simple. You're using an AI agent when you decide to relinquish decision-making control to the AI. So when your AI agent books an airplane ticket for you and uses your credit card to pay for it without you managing that process, that's an agent, right? Like you've given up control, you've relinquished control to the agent, and it makes a decision on your behalf. And that's going to test everybody's ability to delegate. It's also going to test our trust, right? Because some of these things are not going to work. So we're going to have some bad experiences. I mean, that's certainly going to be the case, right? And so this is going to be
Absolutely.
a tricky transformation. But how much do you trust the machine? This is a great question. Everyone's going to have to ask themselves and say, gosh, I don't trust it at all, or I trust it 100%, or somewhere in between. We're all going to go through that process in the next year. The organizations that learn how to develop that trust and are able to deploy reliable, predictable AI, those organizations are going to have a decided advantage because they'll move much faster. People be free to make other decisions and focus on other creative work. The
That's
organizations
absolutely
that
right.
don't, they're going to be held back. They will not have that capability.
That's absolutely right. And I do want to remind everyone, because it is at that point, it is not as much about technology as it is about trust, to
Yeah.
leap into the unknown, and to work towards making the unknown tangible. And if I'd just like to remind everybody of that very famous 1979 IBM quote, which is, a computer can never be held accountable Therefore, a computer must never make a management decision. And
Oh, wow. I didn't know that quote.
it's
That didn't age well.
no, no. And I do want to just kind of say, like, if we just play out a scenario of which most people will laugh at, but I think you'll appreciate that it's actually not only probable, but it's going to happen, which is the CEO founder of Bumble, Whitney Wolf Herd, had said or described a scenario about the future of dating. She said that each person is going to have essentially a digital twin. I don't think she used those words, but an AI powered digital twin. Those digital twins will be out dating other digital twins until they find the right person or persons for you to actually meet in real life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I
that,
mean, honestly, it makes a ton of sense, right? Most relationships today are formed from online dating apps, and yet most people who use those apps express great dissatisfaction with the way they work. Also, just the idea of like scrolling and swiping and is annoying, right? That was fascinating for 15 minutes for some people, and now it's become a tedious chore. So why not delegate that task to an agent to go find 10 people that you might like and narrow the playing field a little bit? Brian, it's a great futuristic scenario. It's a great illustration of relinquishing decision-making control to a machine. So thank you for showing us what an agent might look like. Folks, you've been listening to The Futurist. It's our pleasure every week to bring another futurist who's going to talk about the trends that are going to shape the future that we live in every single week on this show. Brian, it's so great to have you back. I'm happy to see you. Happy to hear you're thriving at your new organization. It's great. I know you've been very busy and flying around the world doing great things for that organization. I'm so excited to be back in touch with you, and I'm looking forward to a very exciting 2025. Hey, for the folks who are listening, happy holidays. We're here at The Futurist every week. We'll bring you another Futurist. In the meantime, I want to thank our team at Provoke Media for making the show possible. And of course, as always, I thank the folks who are listening to the show. The feedback that we get from our fans and listeners is incredibly empowering. We're very happy to get it. It's been a great pleasure for us making the show. Brett had to jump off early, but on his behalf, and of course for me and all the folks at Provoke Media, happy holidays. We're thrilled to have you here listening to our show. We can't wait for 2025 and the brilliant future ahead. That's it for now, Brian. I'll see you in the future.
in the future.